Welcome to Powered by Authenticity. I'm so happy to have you guys here tonight. And speaking of happy to have here with us, I am so excited. If anybody saw my LinkedIn post today, I've just been waiting for this conversation. I'm joined by Sarah Elkins. Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I have been looking forward to this for weeks.
Yeah, it's great. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Well, let's just start with where I'm coming from, because I think that's a little on the unusual side. I'm calling in from Montana, the capital of Montana, Helena. And we moved here in 1999, so 25 years ago in April. And it was because I had this high-powered job in the district. I was implementing this pretty incredible software called PeopleSoft at different agencies across the region. So I worked with the Federal Reserve and the NSA. I had super high security clearance way back then. And throughout my pregnancy, I got my security clearance, started the work, had the baby, went right back to work, and realized that it wasn't going to work out the way I thought it would. I had this impression that I would have this great nanny and I'd go right back to work and everything would be fine. And it didn't work out that way. I remember the very first time leaving the baby with the nanny, and it was almost an hour each way on my commute going up the BW Parkway. And I would cry all the way to work because I missed the baby. And because I was breastfeeding, I would fill up with milk. And so I'd have to go straight over to the pumping room, which they actually had back in 1998. This would have been late 98. And I was able to collect my milk, and then I would work, and then I'd have to collect again in the afternoon because it was just, nonstop. And I'd get home and I'd be just exhausted. And I had this, it was so exhausting. I remember this one moment. Now, like I said, I've always been in that kind of career mode up to that point. And I remember getting home one night and the nanny threw the baby into my arms. And I sat down on the couch to nurse him. And I had my cordless phone, not cell phones. We didn't have any then. But I picked up my cordless phone and I called my mom to check in, let her know how things were going. And as soon as she answered, I burst into tears. And she is a baby nurse. She spent 30 years in the labor and delivery room. And she immediately went to total panic. What's wrong? What's wrong? What happened to the baby? This is the first grandchild. So everything, hinges on this baby. And I couldn't gather myself. I was crying. I was sobbing. I couldn't gather myself to tell her we were okay. And I remember this moment of saying, we're okay. He's okay. I'm fine. And she's like, is it postpartum depression? Are you sure you're okay? And I said, no, I'm okay, Mom. And once I finally gathered myself, I looked down at this baby who had opened his eyes, and he's looking up at me, those huge brown eyes, very concerned. And I said to my mom, it's just that now I know how much you love me.
Aww.
And everything changed in that moment. I didn't know that at the time, because in our stories, we don't realize till after the fact what that trigger was or what that pivotal experience was. And it was that moment. And now I can look back almost 26 years later and say, okay, that's when I realized that my priorities had completely shifted. And it was about a week later, I told my husband we needed to live somewhere where one of us could stay home more with the baby, because it didn't make sense to me to have a baby and have somebody else raise him.
Yep.
And it wasn't long after that, he got offered a job in Montana, and we moved across the country. And I didn't know anyone. It was terrifying and exciting. And it took me a long time to get back into any kind of career path, because I left everything behind. So that story tells you a lot about who I am and what matters to me. So I like to use that as kind of the descriptor.
Yeah. A lot of that resonates with me. I shared a blog not that long ago about a moment in time where I went to my parents' house and I had producer Ken on my hip, and I just hadn't had a break. I was in school, I was working full time, and I'd done a weekend kind of side where whatever I sold, I got to keep the money. So it felt like a really big bonus opportunity, but no rest, no sleep. And I said to my mom, I just don't have any food. And she's like, here, take some money. And I'm like, it's not because of the money. I just started crying. It's just like you get so exhausted in that moment. But those are kind of defining moments that you go back and you look at and you're like, that mattered. Like it didn't seem like in the moment, but that's a significant moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I can't wait for our discussion today. It's that story set the tone of you're such a delight. And I remember meeting you for the first time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you're such a great person and just a wonderful, wonderful, just your soul. You have great soul and bones. We love to do an icebreaker here. So being in Montana, I can only imagine what some of the amazing fall options you have. But what's a highlight for the fall season for you?
Well, the highlight of every season for me is being outdoors and hiking. And what I love about hiking in the fall is that even in Montana, there are some areas where you can see color changing. It's not like a coastal region where you actually see significant color changes. But I'm noticing these shifts in my energy and in the nature, the energy in nature changes. And I just love to take these moments on my hikes. They're not just for exercise. I intentionally stop to take inventory of what I'm seeing, what I'm experiencing, to have a moment of awe when I see my dog leap in a single bound over a log, or when I notice certain rocky outcrops and things growing out of very unlikely places, like solid rock. There's a tree on the mountain that I love to watch through the seasons, even though it's a pine tree, so it doesn't really change, but you can kind of sense the energy shifting where it's kind of going to sleep. And it comes right out of this solid rock, and it's big, and it immediately takes a 90-degree turn and then another 90-degree turn. And it's so unlikely to be so resilient and powerful. And yet here it is in the middle of this mountain. So I love every season because I get to be outside in every season, but fall is definitely pretty special in watching that transition of energy. It's not unlike the transition to spring, right?
Yeah. Everything's waking up instead of going to sleep in the spring. So I know exactly what you mean by that. Oh, that's wonderful. And I remember you sharing the story about your dog and taking him hiking with you. So it's so fun. I'd have two little puppies. They would just probably take off and just start eating leaves.
Which would be fine.
It would be fun.
They come out looking a lot like they did.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Hey, producer Ken, how's it going tonight?
Hello.
What about you? I think I have a couple ways that you're going to answer this question, but I'm curious to see what your final answer is going to be. What's your favorite highlight for the fall season?
October 1st through mid-December, sitting out in the woods. Bow season opens October 1st.
Hunting season.
That's where I want to be every weekend.
Yeah.
Weekday, if I could eke that in somehow.
Yep.
Well, Ken, you should check out some hunting around Montana.
It's on my list. Actually, my wife is worried that if I go to Montana for a hunt, I will never come home.
Well, you're welcome here.
It's so pretty there. For me, it's really about just football and baking and just that we have so much family in the fall, and all of these things bring us together. So that's kind of what I look forward to the most, and the cool temperatures, and everyone just enjoying some apple pie, which Ken made last week, and just kind of being together. So it's just a great time of year. I love it. So.
Oh, yes. And saying apple pie just reminded me of one of the other aspects of this month that I love is we have 2 apple trees in our backyard. And this is the time of year that we start harvesting them. And I slice a whole bunch and dry them out. And then I slice them and freeze them for apple pie. And there's something so satisfying about using apples from my garden to cook with. The seasonings, the herbs that we pulled from the garden at the end of the summer. There's something really satisfying about that.
I love that. I wish we had an apple tree. I've been eating apples every day from the local grower, but it's just, I can imagine how just satisfying it is and then in the middle of winter and the off seasons, you can just pull right from your freezer. It just tastes and reminds you of fall over again. So that's amazing.
It is.
Well, I would love for you, Sarah, to share with everybody the work that you do as coach, as mentor, as a speaker, and really, what it is that you go out and you help others achieve through those exercises.
Well, thank you for asking. I'm yet again going to start with a story because that is a lot of what I do. I recently worked with a woman who was giving a keynote presentation that she put a lot of pressure on herself to make this one especially good because she wants it to be able to refer her for more of these kinds of speaking engagements. And so she hired me and we worked together. We had a 3-session program that we worked together on and really laid out what her goal was in terms of what she wanted her audience to think, feel, and do at the end. We picked out very specific stories, like my pivotal moment of calling my mom, like your pivotal moment of talking about not having food in the house. We picked out very specific stories that were relevant to her goals for the audience to learn and remember and do at the end of this workshop or keynote. And we made it very engaging and interactive. And she did it 2 Fridays ago and called me within about an hour of doing it. And she was on fire. She was so excited because immediately following, she got a standing ovation. And then as she was trying to leave the room so that she could breathe, she was inundated with people coming up and talking to her, wanting to share their stories, excited for the impact that she had on them. It was exactly how we measure success after a keynote. I mean, I do keynotes as well, and that is just the most powerful reminder that what you're doing matters, is that immediate response from the audience after you're finished. So that's one area that I do. And then another one is that I recently worked with a huge group of engineers to walk through their StrengthsFinder results, which is a Gallup tool. They refer to it now as CliftonStrengths, but it's hard to shift that name away from StrengthsFinder because that's most familiar. But basically what I did is I only had 90 minutes and I did 8 of the same session. 8 times I did the same session with 40 to 60 engineers in the room each time. And every time they'd come up to me afterward, I'd have at least 4 or 6 different engineers come up to me afterward and thank me and then ask me if their spouse could take the assessment. Oh. Now, the reason this is important, the reason I'm sharing this particular story is that engineers have a tendency to be my skeptics. They're the ones that look at an assessment like this and either dismiss it because they can't imagine it being accurate. What's the use of it? What's the practical application? Or they get sensitive to it because, like any assessment, oftentimes those labels that feel like they're being created about you are usually the things that you've been most criticized for. So many people, their first response is this edge of hostility because they don't want to be reminded of what they're criticized for, especially if they have had this experience throughout their lives. And so for these engineers to see the value of this tool so quickly in only 90 minutes and to notice how differently they can communicate to improve their relationships, to improve the productivity and satisfaction at work was just overwhelming.
Yeah.
I remember walking out, I did 2 sessions a day for 4 days. And every day I would come home and just walk. I'd get out on the mountain near my house and just try to process what I had experienced. It was extraordinary.
That's amazing. And helping people communicate with one another. I mean, that's a long lasting aspect of the work that you're doing. I mean, if teams can't communicate, then work doesn't get done. People, aren't able to achieve what they would like to achieve. So what amazing work. That's great.
Yes, it's incredibly rewarding, especially because I would say probably 90% of my clients come back to me. So I've been working with a handful of nonprofits across the state of Montana, and most of them contract with me long-term to provide onboarding for new employees. So they have them take their StrengthsFinder assessment. I spend an hour with them describing what their strengths are and coaching them. And then sometimes they'll actually hire me to facilitate a conversation between the new employee and their boss so that they get really clear about expectations in terms of communication and how each person approaches their projects and their tasks. So it's really an honor to do what I do because I know the impact of it and I'm told regularly, which is just motivating, inspiring, awesome.
Absolutely. I wish more people would do that. What a great idea when you're new to an organization, you're new to a person that you're reporting to, just to be able to go in with that deep understanding of how you can relate to one another on a different level. It just sets you up for success. So that's amazing work. And, again, I really wish more employers would look at that as part of the onboarding process.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Out of all of that, what brings you the most joy?
Oh my gosh. I really think of myself as a baseline happy person. So when it comes to joy, very small things light me up. And I think some of that is intentional and sometimes is environmental. It's how I was raised. My mother is the same way. I think the thing that brings me the most consistent joy is getting random texts from clients. So I'll give you an example. Just a few weeks ago, I had worked with an employee as part of their onboarding, and she had mentioned during our conversation some of the communication issues she was having with her teenage son. And he's 15. And I remember when our boys were 15, and it can be hard to communicate with them and for them to communicate with us. So I had given her a couple of ideas about where she might be miscommunicating, where his perceptions might be coloring their relationship based on her communication style. And it was about a week later, I had given her my phone number because I sent her something from my phone, an image from my phone. And she texted me 3 hearts, a yellow, a red, and a green heart. And the message said, I just had a 6-minute conversation with my son. And anyone who has had a teenager at home understands that a 6-minute conversation is a long conversation with a 15-year-old boy. And her point was, and she told me later when she wrote a longer email message to thank me for what we had talked about. But the longer email message said it was complete sentences, it was thoughtful, and I know it's not the last time that's going to happen.
Aww.
So yeah, that brings me pretty significant joy to know that what I was working with her on for work translated to a significant improvement at home.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think you're probably the same. That trumps the financial aspect of the work that you do, like making such an impact on somebody's life. Like when you go through life and you know that you can do that, that means more than the financial aspect. It really does. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. And I know we touched upon this a little bit, but the Clifton Strengths, I still was calling it Strengths Finder as well. That's an important part of the work that you do. So as you're helping people understand themselves and, kind of how that translates, do organizations realize like the benefit that's bringing, share maybe your aspect of how companies are benefiting from an investment in the exercise?
Well, it really depends on the company, of course. There are some organizations that I worked with in the past that I won't work with anymore, who hire me to fix a problem. And their idea of the problem is usually a person. And they bring me in to work with the team, but really the underlying thing is this person is causing the problem, or this person is A or B. And oftentimes they end up using any of these tools. They could use the DISC assessment, they could use Myers-Briggs, they could use even Enneagram. You can use any of these as a weapon to build ammunition against somebody. As a matter of fact, that's part of why I always disliked assessments. Until I found this one, I couldn't stand it. And I went through a lot of them in my career. And I remember one especially where it turned out very similar to my StrengthsFinder, that I am an idea person. I'm a big thinker. I love to work with people. I am not a maintenance mode kind of employee. I like to build things from scratch, but don't ask me to maintain it once it's built. That is never going to be my favorite place to be. I can do it, but it's not going to be pleasant. And after this assessment, my boss, using air quotes, said, "Well, I guess since you're a big thinker, you just can't do this." I mean, it was just so hurtful, right? This was not, "You're such a great big thinker, let's take this off your plate," or "Let's find a way to make this task a little less onerous for you." It was a complete dismissal of my talents and acknowledgement of my blind spots. So some companies, they don't follow up with this. They don't have the leadership on board, understanding that they also have to look in the mirror. Mm-hmm. It can't be just the employees that are the problem. It has to be leadership taking this on, owning it for themselves, recognizing where their blind spots are. And one of the best benefits of this tool is that at the end of a team conversation, people start to recognize the beauty that people bring who think differently than they do. Mm-hmm. One of the things I noticed a few years back is that in general, we gravitate toward people who are our opposites in our personal lives. I know my husband and I are very different. We think in really different ways. We share a couple of top talents in our top 5, mm-hmm. but in general, character-wise, our personalities are very, very different. And that's wonderful. It's part of what makes us such a complementary and strong team. But at work, we gravitate toward people who are just like us, who think like us, because it's easier. It's so much easier that way. But we will never be as creative, as innovative, as satisfied, or as productive if we're surrounded by people who think just like us.
Yep.
So one of the things that a lot of the teams that work with me ongoing ask me to review their matrix of strengths. So I have a grid that shows all of the top 10 strengths of every employee on the team. And we can see where the patterns emerge and where the gaps emerge. And we can actually identify what kinds of approaches are going to be best for what kind of job. And we can write the job description and the interview questions to attract the kind of person that they need in that role.
Amazing.
So it is amazing. It takes time, and it's not going to happen overnight. But I can tell you that all the teams that I've worked with consistently become what we call strengths-based teams or strengths-based organizations.
Yeah.
They have lower turnover, higher retention rates, higher internal promotion rates. And in general, their satisfaction at work just goes up.
Well, sure, because I mean, think about it. To your point, if you love ideation and bringing things to market, but you do not want to have the ongoing maintenance, but you've got somebody who loves to do that. I mean, that's just a team who is set up for success. Like that is putting a person perfectly in place that helps round out and bring value to an organization and a team. So I love that. I just so many people, I think, devalue the necessity and the return if you've got that diverse, different approached type of teams bringing and working together. So I just love that. It's great.
Yeah, me too. I love it because in this particular assessment, the approach is, this is your magic. This is what you do really well. Mm-hmm. Here's when you look at these tasks and you approach it this way, in your intuitive way, you can move mountains. And when you look at it from the perspective of somebody with different talents, this is where your communication can shift so that you're speaking the same language.
Yep. That is great. Well, I had never done a CliftonStrengths. I had done many of the other kind of assessments that are out there. So I did do the CliftonStrengths assessment, and I've shared it out with you. And I would love for you to tell me what you saw when I shared out this report. Now, I'm being a little bit vulnerable to not only my listeners, but in front of my son. So he's probably aware of some of this stuff, but but I would love just to hear your thoughts.
Oh, I love to do this. And Emily, I'm looking at yours and just grinning because your talents are really well distributed. You have at least one talent in all four of what's called the domains of StrengthsFinder. So each domain, there's the executing domain. That's what I call the get shit done domain. These are the people who are really task oriented. They just want to get the things done, and they want to think about them as little as possible. But they just want to get stuff done. Mm-hmm. And then you have the strategic thinking domain, which is where you have your futuristic. So you lead with achiever, your very next talent is futuristic. And strategic thinking is exactly what you would think. It's the people who like the deep thinking. They take the time to collect information and to analyze the information before they're going to make a decision. And those two together, what I'm seeing in yours is that your achiever, which is very goal oriented, is less likely to be focused on tasks and more likely to be focused on people. So when you're setting goals, it has more to do with, at the end of this conversation, I want this person to feel great about themselves. Or I want them to feel like they made progress today. Mm-hmm. And that is especially critical. I want them to feel like they are making progress. That's your developer. So your top three talents, achiever, futuristic, and developer, when a project or a coaching client comes to you, your first approach is to set goals based on a common understanding of what the future state will look like.
Yep.
That's just immediately your approach.
Yep.
Now, the reason this is important is because this is not a horoscope. You gave Gallup all the information they needed to spit out this report and your approach. And that's so important to recognize, because if Google can predict your behavior, then so can Gallup.
Yeah.
And what's great about these three talents together is that it's so focused on human progress. That is your end all. I would be willing to bet that if you have done the Find Your Why with Simon Sinek, or you've read that book, that your why has something to do with improving and seeing human progress and having a vision for what that can look like.
Yep. You are right.
Can you share that with us?
Well, it's, for me, it's wanting people I want people to feel like they are always achieving their goal, and whatever they want to do, they can go and accomplish. Like, that is I want the other person's future to be what they want it to be. And I just want to stand beside them and give them opportunities to match that goal. Like, my goal and purpose in life is to support people and to provide what I can to help them make their future and their goals attainable and achievable, and have fun and excitement along the way. My job is never, and I look at even just from a leadership perspective, my job is not to do anything other than get the right people in there, bring them success, and make them understand that they're valued. Like, that is the most important thing to me in this world. I just want people to know how valued they are, whether it's, at the job, whether it's, at a church event. Everybody that I come into the opportunity to meet and to work with in one way or another, they just need to know how much I value, appreciate, support, and will help them in any way I can to achieve the goals that they want to in life.
That's awesome. And that speaks to every one of your top talents. Everything you just said, I can associate with each of your top talents. So I'm curious, before I do that, I'm curious what producer Ken is thinking about these talents and where he has seen them show up. So Ken, just so you know, Achiever is the goal setter. This is how every once in a while you'll notice your mom will set an arbitrary goal because she just feels like she needs to set a goal. She's the one that might write her to-do list and then add something she already did just for the satisfaction of crossing it off. That's the achiever.
I'm feeling like that.
And the futuristic is the part of... Okay, so what else do you see in this that you've heard so far?
You caught me taking notes through half of that there. So,
oh, yay.
I just think you're generally spot on with a lot of it.
I will say one thing that you're probably not, I'm not sure he would put to this, but I think I can, is that random goal is that I'll just decide to sign us up for a half marathon and be like, this, we just have to go keep on track. Like, this is what we're going to do. Toronto.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Yeah, I was initially going to say that.
That's exactly right. Yes. So that's actually that's a perfect description of where sometimes our strengths get in our way. Now, granted, that worked out okay. And I'll give you a couple of examples, but let's talk through first how what you said in your why, how that is complemented or described in your strengths. I mentioned the goal setting. Your futuristic is that vision. The thing about your futuristic is that when somebody tells you how they see their future, you can touch and feel it, and you know how to set incremental goals to see incremental improvement. It just comes to you so naturally. You're such a natural teacher. So that's what the futuristic is when somebody else describes what they see, and you can see it, you can touch it and feel it, and you know what incremental goals need to be set to get them there. That developer is the part of you that can see the potential in somebody or something that's underperforming. You see something that's on a scale of 1 to 10, that's a 2 or a 3, and you can see, touch, and feel what it would be like as an 8. That's just your nature. So one of the things, if I were to give you a gift, if we were meeting up and I was your coach, I always give my clients a gift that represents their natural talents. I would give you a seedling, a plant, but it would be small, that has the potential to get bigger. I would not give you seeds. That would not be your thing.
Yep.
That would be restorative, and that's low. That's 19 on your list.
Yeah, that's
I
not
would
me.
give you a seedling because you love to celebrate progress and growth. So you acknowledge and celebrate every incremental improvement. Now, that's usually a contradiction to achiever, because many achievers are very goal-oriented, and noticing incremental improvement isn't even on their radar. So this is a unique combination of the developer and achiever. And then the communication, as you said, it's so important for them to know their potential, for them to reach their goal. So that communication is your motivation to understand and to be understood. That's the communication part. You externally process what you're experiencing with that person. That's what the communication is. And it helps them create the vision and touch and feel it the way that you have experienced it through their eyes and their words. Your self-assurance is just exactly what you would think. You've seen this before. You have a pile of evidence that you can manage this because you've managed all of these other challenges. Your self-assurance walks in with the knowledge, intuitive, innate knowledge that you can do this. It's not confidence necessarily, although that is definitely a byproduct of it. And then I'm going to go to numbers 6 and 7 because I think it's really important. Empathy as a talent is not the same thing as being an empathetic person. It's a really critical distinction when you have empathy in your top talents, because as we currently describe empathy as feeling, sensing somebody else's emotion, that is often not the best approach to a problem solving, right? Sitting with somebody in their emotion isn't always going to help you solve the problem. Sometimes that can get in your way. But empathy as a talent is your keen observation of emotion in others. And the beauty in that is that you can set up almost like an invisible force field so that you are using that as a tool of observation versus absorbing.
Yep.
So I'm really glad that you have empathy in your top talents, and I'd really encourage you to create some sort of image to remind yourself that observing the emotion is going to help you resolve or help. It's going to help you help them as opposed to absorbing it. And then that last part, I want to just briefly talk about your belief, because you were so enthusiastic and emotional in your description of your why. That's your belief. It's this core value that can't be shaken. And sometimes, so I like to describe your blind spots as the ways that your strengths sometimes get in your way. Weaknesses are those things at the bottom of your list. So we're looking at your harmony, intellection, deliberative, context, consistency. Those are what we could actually consider weaknesses. And these are the things that if you need somebody to notice all the potential obstacles and pitfalls in a project, then you want one of these people with deliberative on your team. These are the resources you look for on your diverse personal board of directors. But as far as blind spots, sometimes that belief can come across as judgy. If somebody else doesn't believe it at the enthusiastic way that you believe it, sometimes it can be hard for you to trust that person or to be in a trusting relationship with that person, because you're questioning, how can you possibly not believe this? How is that even possible? So that's where that can get in your way. You already know where some of the others get in your way. The self-assurance, sometimes when you walk into an environment where you're actually not confident, sometimes you can get really uncomfortable to the point of being prickly, because being afraid and uncomfortable almost has a visceral response for you, a physical response for you. So it can get kind of prickly and hard to manage that. And then, as we mentioned, sometimes your achiever will set an arbitrary goal. If you don't have daily goals, or if you are in transition in your life and you feel like you can't set goals because you can't see an immediate future, that's when you sometimes set arbitrary goals. So there's nothing wrong with setting goals, incremental goals, if you don't see a future and you're having trouble setting long-term goals. As a matter of fact, I would encourage you to be really intentional about the goals you set. So if you're thinking about a half marathon, thinking about that as, oh, okay, here's an opportunity to feed my achiever because I haven't felt like I could feed it lately. And then definitely taking into consideration the consequences of actually reaching the goal. Okay, if we reach this goal, I'm going to be really sore for the next few days. How is that going to impact, my week or my travel or my brain? If I achieve this goal, it means that I will have been training for the next few weeks, however many weeks. How is that going to impact other aspects of my life and my goals? So being intentional and conscious about setting those goals will really be helpful. So you've been nodding. I want to hear your thoughts here.
It's so interesting to me. So first of all, I love this. It's funny you said breaking the goals down into smaller tasks for someone to help them obtain their overall objective. I call it bite-sized pieces. And I do this all the time. I'm given, somebody will come to me with a problem. I'm like, hold on, we'll get there, but let's break it into bite-sized pieces. And it's actually, for a few of my clients, it's become just, the laughing point is, oh, here she comes again. She's going to tell us what we need to do and break it into these pieces.
Piece?
Yep.
My snack. What snack am I going to eat right now?
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. And I love another consideration as you're working with clients is there are a lot of clients like me that don't have achiever in their top talents. I don't have anything in the executing domain in my top talents. So I have a business coach that helps keep me accountable. She nudges me. I pay her to for lack of a better phrase, to babysit me, to make sure that I am staying on task, because I have a tendency to not do that.
Yep.
So when she started working with me, one of the conversations we had was, goals don't inspire me. Goals do not motivate me. I am not goal-oriented. And when I hear people setting up their annual goals, I get a little vomit in my mouth. Like, I literally get so uncomfortable. It just is not motivating to me. It makes me anxious. So knowing that, you can adjust your language for people who don't have that same drive that you have for goals, and use your developer. Turn up the dial on your developer and turn down the achiever dial, and think about using your communication. What is the language that will motivate them? And my business coach uses the word focus. We're going to use a focus area, and not focus as in sitting down and getting stuff, sitting for an hour and focusing, because that's also not in my DNA. Focus is like number 28 on my list. But she'll talk about focus areas. And she talks about action, because that is what inspires me, is action. So she says, what are you going to do? What are the 3 things you're going to do today? And I'm like, ooh, I could do that. That totally lights me up.
Right.
So you have all of the, you have all of the capacity and tools that you need to, I'm sure that you are a fantastic coach, because this combination of talents is just kind of ideal for what you're doing.
Oh, well, it's exciting, and I'll just share one quick story with you, because you kind of mentioned taking somebody who is performing at a 2 but could be a 10. I have this thing where I just love to get to know people. So a few years ago, my team and I were in Pensacola, Florida, and someone may find this silly, but this is a true story. And the guys that I was traveling with wanted to go to, I think it was like a Lone Star. It was one of those just chain restaurants, and I'm like, oh, okay, fine, we'll go. And we had a waitress who was phenomenal. Like her everything in the way she did it, her customer service, her everything. And her name was KK. And I remember asking her, like, what is waitress saying what you want to do? Oh, no, I'm in school for IT. I'm like, oh, are you? And then she had roots to like New York, and she had roots to where my brother was living at the time in Florida. And at the end of it, I got to know that her grandfather had just everything about her. I was like, I will hire you tomorrow. I have a help desk position that, I will hire, just because what you lack in technical, you make up in customer service and being able to talk to people and, calm situations. And it's just, so even from that perspective, I can't help but want to, when I see somebody who can succeed and meet any goal that they put out for themselves, if there's a way that I can help with that, I'm going to. And, Miss KK, she never called me, but there's still a job for her if she decides to. But I would have hired her like on this, like I had a help desk position open, and she would have been perfect for it, because a lot of those positions, when you're first starting out, they're the perfect way to learn the technology. The hardest thing I have when I'm hiring those roles is the personality, and getting people to understand in a stressful situation how you can diffuse it. So yes, that one related to me, and I thought of that interaction right away when you said that.
Yes, absolutely. And you do it all the time. It's so instinctual for you.
Yep.
And what I love about that story is that oftentimes a developer will hire somebody exactly as you described, that they may not have all the laundry list of skills I need, but I know they can get there.
Yep.
We have to be very careful with developers to make sure our whole team isn't in development.
Yep.
Because then as the boss, you end up taking on way more. You hired people so that you can take on less, so you can delegate. And that is one thing I've seen in some of my supervisors that I've worked with, is it's great to hire somebody that can develop into the position. You also need to make sure you have people that can do the job when you hire them.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. Oh my gosh. Thank you for doing that. That was so interesting to me. It actually sparked some ideas as we were sitting here, and just so thank you so much. That was so interesting. And Ken knows that the next time I say we're sitting there after a podcast recording, I'm like, hey, let's go do this. Let's go run this half marathon. What do you think? He can say no. Right?
Well, he
Just
can
don't
say,
ditch me again.
Yeah.
we can. You can say, we can do that, Mom, but I just want to make sure that this is an intentional goal that we're setting here. Or he can say, I don't really want to do that. What's a different goal we can set instead?
Go to pie making class together or something.
Hey, I'm usually all in for the run.
Yep.
I bet you are. I bet you are. Well, we have to feed these talents. I love to cook and nurture and nourish people. Our dining room table is constantly filled with guests. And so I love using that as an analogy. We have to feed these talents. And what ends up happening with a lot of people, especially if you're stuck in a particular job and you don't feel like you have the luxury of changing jobs or even adjusting the tasks that you already have, one of the things we have to remember is that these need to be fed, or we start to find ourselves very dissatisfied. And especially as women, we have a tendency to set aside our satisfaction. Mm-hmm. We have this underlying dissatisfaction and we ignore it, we dismiss it. We tell ourselves, oh, I shouldn't be dissatisfied. I hate that, shoulding on ourselves. I shouldn't be dissatisfied. I have a roof over my head. I have a great job. I have this wonderful family. I shouldn't be dissatisfied. But that dissatisfaction is going to grow. It's not going to go away until you figure out where it's coming from. And 90% of the time, when I'm working with people, I can find it within 15 or 20 minutes of looking at their strengths and talking to them about what they're doing on a daily basis. The beauty of that is that that doesn't mean they have to quit their job the next day. It means we can find ways for them to feed the talents that they're not feeding in their current job while they're either adjusting the job to fit better or looking for a new position. How do we feed this at home? How do we feed this in different ways so that we're not desperate? Because as soon as we're desperate to find a job, if we find a new job, it's probably going to be out of the frying pan and into the fire kind of job. You're going to go from one bad one to the next bad one. So that's the last thing I'll say about StrengthsFinder is you have to find a way to feed those top talents.
Yep. Well, I love it. I'm going to highly encourage a lot of individuals that I have in like top of mind to reach out to. But how can someone connect with you, Sarah, and go through this exercise? Because my gosh, how valuable is just this conversation that we've had in the past 50 minutes? Like it's just, it's resonated so much. And like I said, it's thought of memories like KK and just, different ideas that I think are popping into mind. So how could somebody reach out to you?
Oh, thank you for asking. And thank you for being willing to be so vulnerable on this, because it's a lot to be recognized for the beauty and magic that you bring, and also to have to look in the mirror and see where sometimes we get in our own way. So I'm honored that you trusted me for this. And I'm sure your listeners are honored to be witnesses in it, of that vulnerability. My website, elkinsconsulting.com, is the easiest way to reach me. If you scroll all the way to the bottom, there are a couple of links to coaching and workshops. I love to do this with teams. And what's been really fun lately is women's groups. So groups of friends. I had a group of 12 women hire me to sit with them and do a workshop on StrengthsFinder. And it was so much fun. I brought a gift for each one of them so that they could really see their strength in action. And so I love to do that. So elkinsconsulting.com. I am very active on LinkedIn. And if you go / the smile is free is my identity on that. And that's a whole long story that I can't get into right now. But if anybody asks, I'm happy to share why I have the smile is free as my ID on LinkedIn. And I'm also on Instagram at Sarah Lynn, Lynn Elkins.
Awesome. And we'll put links in the show notes as well, so that they're a clickable link for all of the listeners. And I actually just, when you said a group of women, I belong to something called the WIT Network, so Women in Tech Network, and we have local chapters. I think this would be a very interesting, like, monthly activity, kind of like a networking opportunity. A lot of those individuals work together, so there'd be that aspect. But I think it would be very interesting to bring like that group of women together to just go over StrengthsFinder. And I could just imagine some of the conversations that could happen out of that. So I may pitch that, and I may be in touch with you. Oh,
Oh, that sounds great. I love that. I'd love to do that.
awesome. Well, what's ahead? Anything fun on the horizon?
Oh, there's always something fun on the horizon. I actually am a professional musician, and our band is going to play at a private party on November 9th. So we're doing some rehearsals for that. I am flying out to California to see my mother at the end of
Yay.
November, and I'll be doing some work in the Bay Area, East Bay, with one of the nonprofits that I've been working with for a few years. So I get to mix business and pleasure toward the end of November. And I am going to continue to hike on the mountain, and I'm looking forward to snow. Now, if you had told me 10 years ago that I would say that, I wouldn't have believed you. But I love hiking in the snow. It gets so crisp. The sky becomes as blue as the sky could ever be. And so I'm looking forward to hiking in the snow.
Oh, that's awesome. I love the snow as well. I love to go make snow angels and do all of the fun things. So I was hoping it would snow by now, but it hasn't. So we'll keep the faith
It's
for very
coming.
soon. Yeah.
It's coming.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much for being on the podcast tonight. I've enjoyed this so much. It was the readout was so interesting to me, and I really appreciate you doing that, and sharing the work that you do and the stories that you've brought to all of us were just. Oh gosh, they just resonated so much. They were absolutely beautiful. So thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. And it's nice to meet you, Ken.
You too.
Yes, thank you, producer Ken. I appreciate your help.
No problem. You can keep those wishes for snow down a little bit, though. Push it back to Thanksgiving.
And as always, I'd like to thank Go Art here in Batavia, New York. They're a wonderful community center. As a matter of fact, they have an artist reception going on downstairs right now as we speak. And it's just a wonderful asset to our community. And they allow me the use of the podcast room. So I appreciate Go Art here in Batavia. And again, Sarah, thank you so much for being here. Just a wonderful conversation. I truly appreciate it.
My pleasure.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I hope everyone has a great rest of their week, and we will talk soon. Thank you.